Hello everyone, welcome back. So, Xilonen is just around the corner and I'm of course very excited for that. She's coming on Wednesday. Now, there's a lot of teams that I am very keen to try out with Xilonen to see which teams end up working better with her and of course which teams run into some problems. So, while we wait, let's just go through real quick 10 teams that I will be keeping an eye on when I get Xilonen. But first, did you know that 94% of y'all haven't actually subscribed? Maybe you should, because A, it doesn't hurt you, and B, it does make me feel better about myself, so we do like that. On top of that, I'm of course going to be streaming on Wednesday night, provided nothing weird happens, both on this YouTube channel and of course on Twitch at twitch.tv/Kategari, so feel free to join us for that. Links of course are in the description down below, if I don't forget to add them in. Now, in this video, I have both Kachina and Zhongli running around as stand-ins for Xilonen, so, just keep that in mind when you're watching the background footage, if you're watching the background footage, of course. Obviously, I'm recording this on Monday, so Xilonen doesn't exist yet, in the game at the very least, so you're gonna have to deal with that. Now, without further ado, in no particular order, let's get into the teams that I will be very interested in with Xilonen. Oh, and by the way, when Xilonen drops, I'm very much intending to go for C0 R1 Xilonen, regardless of whether it's more primo efficient to gun for C2, etc, etc. Alright, let's start off with two teams that are very similar archetypes, but they do require different considerations, and of course I'm talking about Freeze and Frenchloy. So, in these teams, I'm going to try and replace Kazuha with Xilonen. I did an entire video during the Kazuha rerun talking about what makes Xilonen necessarily better than Kaz, and of course vice versa. So feel free to check that out. But one of the biggest challenges is going to be whether I can start mastering the skill of baiting enemies into bomblets as opposed to grouping bomblets into enemies. Now, we'll also need to investigate whether there's any way for Xilonen to heal enough for a Furina team in the form of Frenchloy. I wonder if playing Xilonen in a similar way to how I would play, let's say, C4 Dory in a single healer team for Furina, i.e. having the rotation start with Xilonen, followed by Furina, into Aloy, into Kaz, into Aloy again, whether or not that could work for, at the very least, getting, let's say, 200 fanfare stacks, if not maxing out all of the fanfare stacks. That way we can actually play a functional Furina team. I'm looking forward to testing out these kinds of interactions very, very soon. Next up, I think Xilonen will be a godsend for Quicken teams like my favorite Quicken team International and of course my Cloran teams. Now, for International, I would be swapping out Baiju, who's very good, but outside of very specific circumstances, I don't really need all of that healing, especially because I have C1 Baiju. So having Xilonen provide the Electro Res and the damage percent might actually make this team just significantly more well-rounded for Quicken, unlike most other teams. Now, considering that this is one of my favorite Lisa teams as well, if I were to, let's say, swap Miko out for Sarah, which is definitely something that I do on occasion, then this might actually end up being an Aggravate team that buffs everything that Lisa basically needs. Lisa's attack and crit damage is being buffed by Sarah. Lisa's EM is being buffed by Nahida. Lisa's damage percent, outside of her build of course, and the enemy res shred is being affected by Xilonen, while Xilonen also sustains her through Xilonen's healing. On top of that, armor stripping is a thing in this team because, well, I have C2 Nahida, but also Lisa has armor strip in her base kit. So we pretty much have all of the buffs except crit rate, which I would then have to sort out for Lisa in her build in order to just make use of everything in this team. Alternatively, because I do have C2 Nahida, it does mean that I could basically do the same thing with Miko as well. So this should be one of the most well-rounded teams just in general. Now, meanwhile, I think Xilonen could also be a very solid alternative to, let's say, someone like Mika when I'm playing with Cloran. The reason why I like Mika on a team like this is because of his attack speed, which works really, really well with someone like Cloran because she's not a melee character. So I will end up losing out on that. The return, though, is, of course, Xilonen's unconditional res shred and damage percent, especially when I'm using Xilonen's Best in Sword, her signature sword, which I should be able to achieve maximum value from, by the way, with the build that I have already pre-farmed for Xilonen. So it's quite possible that Xilonen is going to end up being a mainstay in my Aggravate teams moving forward. So, Xilonen should be a perfect alternative to the likes of Zhongli or Kachina in the Navia double Fek teams. That much seems certain at the present moment. Oh, by the way, Fek means Pyro, Hydro, Electro, Cryo, for those who are wondering. This, I believe, is a term coined by J Stern. I don't remember who was the first one who said it. A similar looking Ningguang double Fek team, or a Noelle Furina Fek team, my personal favorite being Noelle Furina Mika, of course, they should also yield similar results. But what I've started to get concerned by is triple Geo teams, because when you're playing a team like, let's say, Navia, Xilonen, Ningguang Fek, or Xilonen, Noelle, Goro Fek, etc, 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 it seems like in all likelihood, Xilonen's Night Soul will expire if you swap out of her, without doing the whole max Night Soul thing, which you basically can't do at C0 if you have a less than double Fek team. I believe you can't even do that even at higher constellations. This is the case with someone like Molani and Kinich in that their Night Soul Blessing state turns off after you swap out of them, but not for Kachina. Although I suspect that may have something to do with the fact that Kachina has off-field damage, so her Night Soul Blessing sticks around for that. Supposedly, one way to sort of fix this for these triple Geo teams is C2 Xilonen, but as I said earlier, I'm going to be going for a sword first. We'll just have to see if I go for C2 later on. But either way, we're going to definitely have to look into these shenanigans when we get to these Geo teams. Alright, we're back with Aloy because we're going to talk about her burning teams, and I'm once again quite confident that Xilonen will be an overall upgrade to Kazuha in these teams. The main issue about Kazuha in these Burnloy teams is that it's very difficult to swell Cryo while enemies are still burning for the second rotation. So that's something I've struggled with for quite some time to contend with. However, Xilonen around should be a perfect solution, as at least if you're playing a burning team with someone like Risley, for example. Once again though, because I'm talking about Burnloy, if I'm replacing Kaz with Xilonen, that means I'm going to have a slightly less new challenge of mastering the technique of baiting enemies into bomblets. If I can figure that out, then I think Burnloy suddenly feels a lot more viable to play than previously thought. Folks in my community know that I don't play HuTao. Except I do play HuTao. Except I don't really play HuTao, because I play Pyro Xiao, and that's what this is all about. Of course, whilst this tends to be a Furina team, we don't actually have to worry about Xilonen's healing aspect because we have Shen Yun to deal with all of that, so no problems there. This is what makes this somewhat considerably different to, let's say, Frenchloy. But I suppose even in Legacy HuTao teams, if you still play Legacy HuTao teams, it's hard to run Kazuha without that second Pyro, because you basically can't swell Pyro for HuTao without, I guess, using HuTao's ult. That's not really ever been an option before you start setting up your Hydro, for example, Yelan. So I think the very popular options of instead of running that second Pyro include running a shielder like Zhongli or running double Hydros. So I guess in those kinds of teams like the old HuTao double Hydro teams, Xilonen should easily fit those teams. Of course, you would need to keep an eye on this whole healing HuTao thing, because outside of Furina teams, that's never been considered a great idea. Like I mentioned in the C6 Chevrus video, Rational is by far my favorite national team. But of course, one thing that C6 Chevy loses out on in Rational is, of course, her Red Shred. So running Xilonen in Rational can mean not only do I get the team to have that Red Shred for both Electro and Pyro, but also Hydro. And on top of that, I can also get the damage percent for Hydro on top of Electro and Pyro. Remember, C6 Chevrus only buffs Electro and Pyro. However, one thing that A and Xiangling will lose out on this team is the attack buff coming from Chevy. Xilonen doesn't actually give attack buffs except for C2 for Xiangling, but I'm not going to get C2 yet, so we'll just have to deal with that, right? As well as the Pyro particles that Xiangling would prefer, obviously, over the Geo particles that Xilonen would produce. And I'm not entirely sure if Xilonen would even be able to funnel particles to Xiangling. We'll just have to see. One of the reasons is because Chevy heals with her skill, Xilonen heals with her ult, so maybe not. Furthermore, C6 Chevy Rational is compatible with Furina. who can provide everyone on the team with the damage percent, whereas Xilonen, if she can't heal enough for a Furina team, then we're going to have to be running Yelan, in which case Shangli loses out on the damage buff. It's only A who gets that damage buff. I think at the end of the day, I will be judging all of this solely off vibes and of course clear speeds. I don't really care to rely on spreadsheet impact for this, but I'm sure maybe there's going to be a TCR out there with some time on their hands. Maybe they can look into this further. Perhaps their calcs could end up with a slightly different result to what I see in game. We'll just have to see. And finally, we have DPS Xilonen, which according to the spreadsheet impact players is probably going to be a main, but I don't care. I want to see what kind of shenanigans I can get up to with, let's say, Xilonen, C4, preferably C6 Goro, Yunjin, and Yelan. Now, because Xilonen is running with the likes of Chiori, that means that the weapon banner is actually going to be quite goated for anyone who is looking to explore all forms of Xilonen, because I suspect Uraku Bisagiri is Shilonen's best in slot DPS weapon. Possibly better than Peak Patrol, but I'm not 100% sure. I haven't seen any calcs to support this or refute this for that matter. But considering that Uraku Bisagiri is a low base attack, high crit damage sword, which of course complements the high crit rate nature of, let's say, the Obsidian Codex artifact set, that also gives normal attacks damage percent as well as skill percent, but Xilonen doesn't do any skill damage, so we don't care about that, and also some defense as well. Well, this is all precisely what Xilonen wants. So as long as losing the first 5-star roll for me results in getting Uraku Bisagiri, then I guess my rolls for Shilonen's weapon would eventually effectively be perfect. We'll just have to see if that happens. That being said though, my excitement for DPS Xilonen memes will heavily depend on what I end up rolling on Wednesday's stream. As of today, being Monday, we now know that Goro is not tied to Chiori's banners. Sag. So without C6 Goro, I am somewhat less excited for investigating DPS Xilonen. And of course, if I do end up actually bypassing Uraku Bisagiri, or not even getting Uraku Bisagiri as the first miss, and I end up getting Peak Patrol first time, then I probably would not be looking into DPS Xilonen anymore. Alright, so those are the 10 teams that I'm most excited for when Xilonen drops. Each team has its own set of challenges and potential synergies, and I can't wait to see how they perform once she's actually here. Xilonen, of course, looks like she's going to be bringing some new life into some of my favorite team comps in particular, so maybe she'll create some surprises. We'll just have to see. And also, real quick, of course, I will be looking into the effect that Xilonen has on Neuvillette teams, specifically the Neuvillette team. Come on, that was a lock. I didn't feel like I need to elaborate on that any further. So if you're as excited about Xilonen as I am, be sure to join the stream on Wednesday night at 9 PM Sydney time for her live showcase, as well as some hands-on team testing. Until then, don't forget to subscribe. If you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe for more Genshin Impact action, and as always, until next time, I will see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye. 律令チョック15難攻不落浄土を解放さし内向意図美しきかな律令15ここより弱滅の時せっそこ見切りました15チョック岩山八九翼よイカズチにさっせ有限なるライブ律令15チョックお茶は負けの万尺来戦や15無我の境地見切りました姿を残す律令難攻不落翼よ浄土を解放さし来光意図美しきかな15律令ここより弱滅の時
邪魔者が粛清を逃げ道はありません。